why is it so difficult for us to know what we want?
Oh, man. So it's difficult because humans are mimetic creatures. We learn by copying. And what we want is something internal. And so as we go through the growth process of going from, someone who can't walk, looking at mommy and daddy walking around, learning to copy that and learning to walk like mommy and daddy, and then learning all of those other copying mechanisms, we're slowly going through a process just by the nature of putting our attention out on other people, of taking our attention away from ourselves. And so desire, the thing that we want, is found inside. And so just by the nature of how growth works, we have to start by looking outside of ourselves in order to become educated. But if we want to get to a higher level of growth, over time we have to learn to look inside and find our desires. But we have a hard time finding our desires and knowing what we want because they're in a place where we don't look.
I think I've heard you say that the thing that we're best at is the thing that it becomes an unconscious habit and we don't even think about it. If that is the case, and the same thing goes for knowing what we want, what's the next step? I guess what's the first step to figuring that out?
Yeah, so you're right. We miss out oftentimes on our best strengths, the things that we are the most potentially talented at, because we usually turn them into survival mechanisms at a very early age and then stop thinking about them and spend most of our time focused on panicking, watching everybody else, trying to copy them and figure out what to do about life. But if you're the funny guy, you don't really think of it as the value that you bring to the table, the thing that could make you profitable. You're just trying to not get hate at school. If you're the kid that is quick with his words and figuring something out, it's just how you've been surviving for years. And so you don't think of it in terms of how do I make this profitable. What you do is you look to others, you look everywhere else, and you go, how are people being profitable? How are people making profit? Oh, I'll just do what they do. When in reality, this skill that you've been practicing your entire life is the thing that people are most likely to pay you for, and you just don't see it. And so it happens all the time.
It does. And it's funny too, because when it comes to not only figuring out what we're best at or figuring out what we want to do in this life, we're so easy to, we never really compare downward. We always compare upward. And social media has made it really even more difficult because we're comparing all of people that aren't even in our social circle anymore. And so we're comparing in so many different facets, but we never compare off of who we used to be. We never compare off of someone doing worse than us. What's the utility of that?
Yeah, so we all know the common advice of surround yourself with 5 people better than you. You're the average of the 5 people you know. Mm-hmm. Always be the idiot in the room. I love how brilliant people always say that. People that are just extremely intelligent are always like, I try to be the idiot in the room. I'm like, you're never the idiot in the room.
Yeah. Yes,
you are surrounding yourself with people who know things that you don't know. That is not being the idiot in the room. That's different. And so the value of comparing upward is that you can see others who have skills that you don't and imitate them and grow. Super valuable. But if that's the only thing that you do and you're a human who has some level of self-worth issues, which is everyone I've ever met,
yep,
then comparing downward is one of the ways in which you can comprehend your value. It's one of the ways in which you can comprehend what you've learned that others haven't. It's a way in which you can see how you are different from others, not just in what you are lacking, but in what you possess. And and a lot of moralistic traditions say, oh, don't do that. Don't always be humble. Always, think of yourself as lower and all of those things. And it's just there is an element of humility that is really important that we have to learn, but there is an error that comes from the lesson of humility if you learn it wrong. And so a lot of people that try to learn the lesson of humility end up just lowering their self-worth end up I'm messing with my words today. They end up just lowering their self-worth, thinking that they're being good, thinking that they're being moral. But to switch over to another rant right away, if you look at the root word of humility and what it originally meant, it means something very akin to close to the ground, but it doesn't mean low to the ground. It means connected to the ground. It means grounded. And so I believe that proper humility is understanding that you are a meaningless speck of dust in the universe, and there are infinite specks of dust, but also understanding that there are some specks that are smaller and some specks that are bigger. And we know that one of the closest things to the definition of God is that of one who is completely aware. And because we know that to the degree that you have awareness over something, you have power. And right, knowledge is power. And so if you are aware that you are a speck, meaning like there's a giant universe and I need to be humble about the fact that anything can take me out at any time, but then also understand there are specks that are bigger and there are specks that are smaller, well, you are the most grounded in reality. And so therefore you are the most powerful. And so true humility is power. True humility is seeing oneself as themselves. And that's why I believe in both comparing upward and comparing downward, is because it's the thing that's going to likely give you the clearest picture of reality.
100%. The polarity is something you talk a lot about, which I find so fascinating, exciting to speak about, because we're so black and white thinkers. It's all or nothing in reality, but it's not that way in actual reality. And so to realize that, you're right, people that are overly trying to be bring more humility into the world are people that are also downgrading themselves and putting other people on pedestals. And that's not going to make you show up in the world as the person that you're supposed to be or become or able to become, if you're showing up as a person that, I need to put this other person on a pedestal because I'm putting that out into the world and thinking that I'm doing good by doing so. But that's just not true.
Yeah. And a lot of people who hear something like what I just said, who really believe in humility and they believe in a lot of the traditional values of that are related to that, they'll go, oh, well, that's not what humility is about. And my response to that is, great, but what is happening when you are teaching people the lesson of humility? Like, let's think about just pure results. When you teach people this framework, do they increase their self-worth? Do they increase their perception of who they are and what they can do in the world? If yes, then awesome, you're doing a good job. But what I found is a lot of people that teach others humility, the people come away viewing themselves as a little bit less, when in fact they need to see that they are more.
I think that's both of our audiences, in the sense that they put other people on pedestals. That's why the podcast is called You Can Too, because I want to almost humanize people that we all put on pedestals because we see ourselves as someone as incapable or like almost there. And that gap between almost there of like, I am capable of some things, but I'm not capable of all of the things that I want to do. We put other people on pedestals and we see ourselves as the person that I could never be like them. And when we identify as a certain type of person, we automatically limit ourselves.
Yeah, we have to see what we could be. And we have to see what we were, and we have to see what we are. And so if we have all of those with clarity, then we can begin to create a path forward for ourselves. And so anything that muddies your view of what you could be, what you were, and what you are is questionable. Anything that muddies those three things is potentially reducing your decision-making capacity. Because humans are able to increase their ability to make decisions based on how clearly they see reality.
I think how clearly they see themselves as well.
Yes, and like optimally what it is them seeing reality is them within reality.
Yeah, because I think that I don't know if this is true, and I'm curious what your perspective is. I feel like most people go through life never questioning their idea of themselves. They never really think about that they identify themselves as some type of person that is just who they are. And so like one of the things that I've been speaking a lot to with friends or people around me is they talk to me as though like, dude, like you're so brilliant, you're fascinating, you're doing all of these different kind of things. And I'm like, don't let yourself off the hook by putting me on a pedestal because you see me as some certain kind of person, and that takes you off the hook and say, well, now since I'm not that type of person, I don't have to put in the work to become that kind of person or actually create those results. It's like letting ourselves off the hook because we're telling ourselves a story that we're not capable.
Yeah, it's so this is tied to Carol Dweck's work, mindset,
Yeah.
right? And so the growth mindset versus static mindset, right? And so we know if you see yourself as I am either good or bad at something, right? This is identity. Then you are less likely to become good at something, because if you view yourself as I can be one of the or the other, and I am currently bad, then you don't see a path to good, right? But if you believe if I work on this, I can become better, then you are more likely to become good at something. And this is like Carol Dweck did amazing work, but it's like this tiny speck of this form of thinking in a really broad universe of thought where people are putting things in fixed places that could be variable. This is okay. This is tied to something really cool. So you'll see that there are people that are very pro labels, right? There are people that are like labeling others with all sorts of things. Yeah, you're a this, you're a that, you're a that, you're a this. And then you'll see in the self-development communities and in the spiritual communities, they'll say, oh, don't label things. That's not good. You shouldn't label things, because then how could you grow? And this is pointing to a polarity.
Right.
And so what's happening is labeling things is one mechanism for survival, right? You have to know what something is to a degree in order to make a decision. And so people that want to label things, they kind of lean more orderly, they lean more conservative, they want to put something in a box so that they can make sense of it and put it in the right place and move on. And then people that lean anti-label are like, oh, well, I can see how that creates stagnation. I can see how that stops people from growth. And I want to grow and I want to explore, and putting all these labels on everything limits things. And they're both right.
Right.
And the reality is, if you label everything and you keep the label on, then your life sucks. But if you take all the labels off and you never label anything, then your life also sucks, because it's a different form of not being able to grow. It creates too much chaos. And so you want to see reality and see again, back to that, like, see what you could be, see what you were, and see what you are. You want to see reality and find a label. Find a label for what you are. But then also understand that labels can change.
Yeah.
Right? And something that I actually said to my girlfriend just recently when we were talking about this was, sometimes you have to identify the label in order to change it. Right? And so people that say, oh, because my ADHD, and that becomes their mantra, they're really going to struggle in life. But people who go, oh, I have the symptoms of ADHD, and so because of that, I could do this, 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 and this, they're going to grow in life. And so you identify the label so that you can let go of the label. But you don't go pro-label or anti-label.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea. I think it's difficult because I think most people that are going to label and figure out that label are going to identify with the label. We're, as humans, I feel like we just identify with whatever we believe to be true. And so if we have something to label ourselves, like you said, it's going to place us in a box. It's like the idea of, if you have friends that you grew up with and they see you changing as someone. I went through this when I was 17. I became a personal coach. At 17, it makes no sense. People are looking at me as like a different kind of person. I really did feel like a different kind of person. I feel like I lived two different lives because of it. But when I started stretching myself, people's idea of me was no longer in alignment with the person that was my idea of me. And so it's threatening to them as well because they see you as a certain type of person. And it's also threatening themselves in a way because they see that the change that they're not making in their life. And so I think the change to recognize a label and then to almost surpass that label is one of the most difficult things that we can do psychologically.
Yeah, and that's why removing all the labels is bad, is because labels create safety. And safety is not bad. Like, it's a good thing, right? You need a degree of those, but then also you need to not get fixed on them. And you'll see this in relationships a lot. You know, like that's a classic place for, oh, we don't like to put labels on things, right?
Right.
We don't like to put labels on our relationship, right? And then there's the other side that is like, look, you're either married or you're not married, right? And that's it, right? And the people that want to get rid of the labels see how when people get in traditional relationships thoughtlessly, they can get stuck and it can create a lot of misery. But then the pro-label people that are saying you're either married or not, they see the chaos that happens when somebody never puts a label on something. And so the reality is you need to be willing to brave enough to put a label on and brave enough to take one off, depending on what is needed for the circumstance. Do you need the security and structure of a label, or do you need the growth and the adventure of no label? So far, every person I've ever met needed both.
Yeah, I would think so, right? I mean, it's the association that we make with that label, right, that makes us feel that sense of safety. And I think another label that we place or association that we make is that achievement has to be associated with stress. And I think, especially in your work and obviously everything that you're creating now, why do you think we hold that?
So it's because it's an integral part of growth. It's just not all of growth. And so the first experience the first experience that someone has when they learn something is they experience something new. Newness, by the nature of it, creates stress. Because it's something that a human has to deal with. And this isn't necessarily a negative experience. It could be fun, right? Oh, look at that new thing. It's really cool. But stress in terms of like you're going to use more calories, you're going to have to process this new thing. Like no matter what, it's going to create some form of a stressor on your life to experience something new. But there are actually two steps to learning. The first is to obtain new things, and the second is to sit with the new thing. And so the problem is when we first get exposed to a new thing, we tend to then get an aha moment, which creates understanding, which also kicks off dopamine receptors, which makes us feel like that's what we need to be doing. We need to be absorbing new things. And so now we start to go, oh, I need to push my limits all the time. I need to absorb the next new thing. I need to absorb the next new thing. Because that's how I'm going to grow. But the reality is, if you absorb something new and then you don't relax and then sit with that new thing and do this crazy thing people call practice, then you will not become skilled. And so growth is actually a constant cycling between the polarities of tension and release. It's a constant cycling between the polarities of stress and non-stress, newness and familiarity. And so you have to absorb a new thing and then take it within yourself until it becomes yours, and then absorb a new thing and take it within yourself. And you'll see a lot of people, as they're trying to go through their process of development, they will either get obsessed with obtaining new things, or they will get obsessed with perfecting, sticking with, building on the things that they have within them. And both of these are extremely damaging. We have to learn to cycle between them.
Yeah, this goes to an idea that I've been thinking about a lot recently of like work-life balance is something a lot of people talk about in the world that they want as one of the main goals of their work, their life. And I'm curious, do you think it makes more sense, and it's going to be different for each person, makes more sense to go to actually achieve work-life balance, say at a 12-month year, and I have work-life balance, and whatever that looks like, I work 3 days and I don't work 4 days, whatever that is. Or is it to go into seasons of obsession and then go into seasons of barely working at all? Does that make sense?
Everybody's different, first of all.
Of course.
I mean, that's actually like something I'm really passionate about, is that a lot of times people are just like looking for the equation
Yeah.
of like, what's the thing, right? Because we're mimetic, we copy. And so we're like, what's the thing everybody else is doing that makes success? I'll just do that. And it's like, it worked for that guy, not you, right? But with that said, there's a reason every religion has a day of rest. There's a reason it's so ingrained in our culture that it's a religious thing for people, is because if you don't have some form of tension and release, you are going to break down. Now, how that looks differs. There are some people that love to sprint for 3 months and then relax for 1. There's others that love to sprint for 3 days and then relax for 1. It differs. But here is one interesting thing I've found about cycles of work and rest, and this applies to work-life balance, is what I've found is that at higher levels of performance, we tend to move more from what looks like prey behavior to predator behavior. So what I mean by that is a water buffalo tied to a harness can pull a plow all day and slowly plod through the fields and get stuff done. But it's a very slow process. It's not what we would call high performance. What's more is it can do it with a thorn in its foot. That water buffalo can keep going. But a cheetah sprints for potentially seconds, and then it sleeps for the rest of the day. And what's more is a cheetah isn't going to attack an antelope with a thorn in its foot.
Yeah.
A cheetah is going to go find a tree and then gnaw on its paw, lick its paw until it heals, and then it's going to prepare, and then it's going to sprint. And I have found that high performance starts to mimic that predator behavior a lot more than it does an animal that would just kind of do the same thing over and over again. And the way this can look in human life is you can work at McDonald's with a broken leg. You can get that done. You can break a leg, and you can hop yourself up on some painkillers, and you can go to work and you can flip some burgers. I mean, you won't be happy about it, just like the water buffalo won't be happy about the thorn in its foot.
Right.
But you can get it done, because it's kind of like a basic labor thing that's repetitive, that you just kind of do over and over again. And at lower levels of performance, I found that plodding tends to work. But if you want to increase your performance, if you are a lawyer trying to navigate a merger and a business deal, it's pretty hard for you to break a leg and then come into work the next day hopped up on codeine, and I mean, hopefully I named the right painkiller. I don't really know my drugs.
Right.
But it's not likely that you're going to have all your mental facilities that you can execute with the precision that you need to. And so high performance, I found, tends to move a little bit more towards these cycles of high effort and low effort. This might make the people of the disciplined people a little bit uncomfortable right now. The people that are like, well, look, you got to show up every day and do the thing. And so I'll say something for those folks. It doesn't mean you don't need to show up every day. It means that the way you show up changes, right? And so we've found that, like, for example, people who do really deep work, like writers, they need to go write every day. But all of them have found out that all of the great writers have found out that you can't write 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. In fact, if you do that, you'll destroy your career. And so what showing up every day looks like, what doing the boring work looks like, actually, is waking up and taking a walk, which Beethoven did every day, smell the flowers, listen to the birds, which Beethoven did every day, and all the other famous people, it's like make walks your religion. Like take a walk, then sharpen the pencils, clean the desk, prepare, and then dive in and do really good work, and then go have a nice day. And so I see that as moving closer to what I call predator behavior rather than prey behavior, where you're sitting there and eating grass all day long, chewing the cud, like constantly at work in some way. High performance tends to move towards much more cyclical behavior.
Yeah, it's like the what you were speaking about earlier, what we were speaking about right before this, benevolent order leads to positive chaos. It's if we're intentional, like some of the leading creative people, I think this is really good for creators as well. They take naps in the middle of the day. They go on walks in the middle of the day. Like they're taking time for boredom in a sense, so that they can perform at the highest level. But when does it get to that point? Is there something that you realize in the people that you work with where they have to get out of pushing and allow things to kind of have that awareness to free flow, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so first of all, this message isn't for everybody. There are lazy people that need to be told to just get to work. But I was a workaholic by the time I was 20 years old. And I went to college when I was 15. And I mean, maybe you could say I was a workaholic by the time I was 17. I don't know. I was working very hard, a lot, all the time. And by the time I graduated, I celebrated a diploma, an ulcer, and anorexia. Like these were my accomplishments.
Yeah.
Right? I was living off the chocolate diet. Not even because chocolate was my favorite thing. I mean, it's my favorite thing. But I was doing it because I didn't want to take the time to cook food, right? And I was not eating because I would forget to eat. Like that was my anorexia problem. Was literally just I'm just working so hard, I'm just not eating.
Wow.
You know, I was getting the whole whites in the fingernails and all the things. Like I was very emaciated, because I had learned about work ethic, I had learned about working hard, and I thought if I just kept working, I would get things done. And this wasn't at a high level of accomplishment in my life. This was at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I really kept up with various patterns of this. Like when I got out of work, yeah, I was just destroyed enough that I just got a manual labor job at a warehouse, but I also joined 5 bands at the same time. And so I was working at a warehouse in Austin, Texas, playing in 5 separate bands at the same time because I wanted to make it in the music world, and I thought this was the way. Not only was I in 5 separate bands, I was busy like trying to innovate and trying to create my own music, and like I had my own project that I was trying to do and like figure that out. And so I was just working myself to the bone all the time, always. Like any moment that I could, I would just try to make it work. And so you asked, like, at what level is this relevant? And I would say it's relevant from the bottom to the top. At any level, this message of, like, there are times when you need to pull back in order to push harder. You need to rest in order to achieve. You need to set limits on yourself in order to push limits, in order to go farther. It's relevant if you're a beginner or you're advanced. And so at that time, I was a beginner. And I didn't start to grow until I had my moment. And I mean, we can talk more about this later if you want, but I had my moment of, realizing that I wasn't all that and I couldn't do much. And so my goal was to do a little. And when I started doing way, way less, then my life started to come together. And yeah, some people, they're lazy and they need to be told to work hard. And that's the only way that they're going to get anywhere. Laziness was not my problem. If I listen to a book by David Goggins and I take David Goggins' advice, I'll just die.
Yeah.
Because I am rigged to want to do what David Goggins described pushing himself to do. I am rigged to desire doing that kind of behavior. And so if I try to engage in that type of behavior, I will just push myself over the ledge. And so I have to learn how to hold myself back. I'm the guy who has to set a timer for when to get out of the ice bath, not how long to stay in.
I'm the exact same way. And it was a real big awakening for me. I want to say last year, I told you I went to Hawaii for a few months. It was the first time where I was in energy that was like the exact opposite of what I grew up in and what I felt like inclined to do. And for people like us, and for a lot of people listening, their automatic response is to work, to work, to work, to build, to create, to put themselves through stress, I guess. And to think that discomfort is the exact opposite, and that's what we have to practice, feels so wrong to do. What helped you do it?
Yeah, so I lost a close friend to suicide, and he was one of the most supportive friends in my life. He was one of the people that believed in me the most. And that was kind of a turning point for me, where I had learned enough about personal development at that time that you could take horrible moments in life and you could turn them into really good things or really bad things. And I decided I was going to make it a good thing. And he'd always encouraged me in all these different ways. And it's something that just clicked at that point, where I said, okay, well, like, how can I best move myself forward? He said I can be great. I still know there's potential, but I've just been a total failure for many years. Let's start acting like you're your coach. Let's start acting like you're going to help yourself grow. What do you need to be thinking about? And so I took a really honest look at my life, and I realized that I was an abysmal failure at everything I was doing. I realized that even though I was trying really, really hard, I was not getting anywhere. And so for me, a big step in my life was admitting that things weren't working. And going against the advice of believe in yourself, manifest, see yourself as being there already, and realizing, oh, you're not there. You don't know how to do that yet. And so I was trying to become a rock star, but I couldn't pay my toll bills. I was trying to, I was trying to build a business that could pay off my student loans in one check, but I couldn't make my credit card payment. And so I really humbled myself, going back to a previous conversation in this podcast. I really humbled myself in the form of I got realistic, where I went, oh, it is not reasonable for you to be going after these goals right now. They are way beyond your capacity. And so let's treat you like the amateur that you are. And that was when I started to learn, and this is what answers your question of how do you learn how to hold yourself back? How do you learn how to deal with that discomfort? Is I started to realize that was my responsibility. It was not my responsibility to try harder. That was actually my temptation. It is my responsibility to pull back. And so a lot of the things in life, a lot of the advice in life, you actually have to look at it squarely in the face and ask yourself, for me, is this a temptation or is this a discipline? Is this something that I need to get myself to do, or is this something that I crave to do? And if it's something that you crave to do, you might need the opposite advice. Right? And so if you walk around all day long and everybody's telling you to be patient all the time, and you really believe in patience, you might be exactly the type of person that needs to say, I need this yesterday. Because you're so patient, you've become a doormat to everybody who makes you wait. If you really believe in, letting everybody do what they believe in, if you really believe in empowering everyone around you, and you just feel so much love for everyone that you don't want to stop anybody, and the advice that you hear is you need to let people be, you might have no boundaries.
Yeah.
You might be a person who has no boundaries, total doormat, and you might need to learn how to feel like an asshole and say no, right? And so this ties to something else that I really love, which is the thing that you care about is the thing that you don't need to worry about. The thing that you worry about is the thing that we don't need to be concerned with,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the thing that you've been emphasizing your entire life. And so I heard this advice of push yourself, and I emphasized it, and it became the thing that I wanted to do. I didn't have to face my demons when I was trying as hard as I when I was trying as hard as I could, because I was just distracted, just chasing. But to sit on the floor and close your eyes and meditate for 5 minutes, ooh, that's hard. And so what I've found, for people to learn to shift, to find the balance that they need, especially in this pulling back, if they need to learn how to do less, usually the first thing they have to face is the demon that says you're a lazy bitch.
Yeah.
And realize that that's not a healthy, that's not the angel on your shoulder, that's the devil. The thing that you thought was the angel on your shoulder is actually the devil on your shoulder. You got the angels wrong, right? And so if you sit down and the first thing you do is feel guilt, then it's probably your job to sit down. It's probably your job to move a little bit slower. And that's probably going to start getting you more results, because nobody becomes high performance by running on red line their entire life.
Such an amazing insight. Yeah, I think it's so true, and it's so difficult for you. You bring up guilt, because that was one of the things I wanted to touch on. Was shame and guilt show up exactly when you're in those moments. It's, I'm a bad person if I'm not doing this, and we beat ourselves up in such a way that we feel like we're already unworthy. As I think everyone holds that belief that I'm not enough as I am. And so for us to take a step back and do what's uncomfortable for us, which is maybe not working, for example, it's so counterintuitive to what the society and what we've been told and what we're telling ourselves every single day.
Yes. Let's talk about how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So the first is, if you're going down this path, you need to just understand that it's your responsibility to face those narratives, those tapes that are playing in your mind. But if you want the tools for dealing with those tapes, the primary tool that I know of is what I call parenting yourself. It's not just it's your responsibility to face these difficult things. It's actually your responsibility to coach yourself into facing these things, to guide yourself into coaching these things, into facing these things. And so one of the most powerful tools I know for helping guilt and shame dissipate is by looking upon yourself as the child version of you that needs to be guided. Why does this allow shame and guilt to dissipate? Well, because if you look on yourself as the child version of yourself trying to grow, you're very quickly going to see that it's entirely reasonable that you have the problems that you have.
Yeah.
And what does a parent do with a child who is not yet capable? Well, hopefully they don't shame them into capability. Mm-hmm. We know that's not very effective. We know that what is effective is showing the child that it's reasonable where they are, and then show them a reasonable way to get where they need to go. Mm-hmm. And this is how you take care of yourself. And so I like to paint the picture of what this looks like. What this looks like is, so you've got Timmy. Timmy is in the kitchen with the family, and Timmy's really young, and Timmy needs to grow to his next stage in helping the family out. And so you go to Timmy and say, Timmy, we really need you to step up. We really need you to be a part of the family. Do you think you could set the table today? And Timmy's been seeing everybody set the table for a while. He's like, oh yeah, I can set the table. And so what do you do next? Well, hopefully you don't hand them grandma's china. Hopefully you don't hand him a bunch of crystal glassware. Mm-hmm. What you do is you hand him 5 plastic spoons. Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, Timmy, can you put spoons around the table just like you saw Mama do it, yeah. Right? Yeah, I can do that. And so Timmy goes and he walks around the table and he puts a spoon on every chair. Mm-hmm.
That's where he's at.
Because the chair is the exact height in proportion to Timmy as the table is in proportion to Mama. And so he's doing the thing. He's putting a spoon on every chair just like Mama did. Like, it looks a little different, but that's fine. And so what do you do next? Well, hopefully you look at that and you kind of chuckle in your head a little bit and you think it's really cute. And then hopefully the next thing you do is you say, Timmy, fantastic job. Great job. Now, we're going to sit there. So do you think we could put them where we won't be sitting? You don't think you could reach up and get them all there? Okay, awesome. Can you do this? Can you do the plastic knives, the forks? And of course, now the dinner is cold and,
Right.
it's been a whole ordeal. But Timmy is now proud. And Timmy is not ashamed of the fact that he couldn't set the table before. He's not ashamed of the fact that he was putting spoons on the chair like a complete moron. Timmy has achieved growth, and Timmy knows that he has achieved growth, and he's proud of that growth. And so as a result, he wants to grow again. Okay, well, this is what we want to experience in our own lives all the time, because humans never change. The way a human learns, the methodologies do not change from age 6 to age 66. Not from 9 to 90. It's not different. It's never different. Sometimes as you're older, you have a larger set of tools in your tool belt, but the actual process of learning and development does not change. And so that gradual process of noticing where the person is, showing them like where they could be, showing them the logical pathway to get there, showing them how it's reasonable that they are where they are. All of those things are how you train yourself into new behavior, into new growth. And if you do that, the shame melts away. Because everything starts to make sense. If you feel that social anxiety, if you're a person who's 30 years old and you feel social anxiety and you go through this process, you're going to go, oh, I was super fucking embarrassed in college. And I just never got over it. And we know that if somebody gets super embarrassed and then they start avoiding something, then their ability decreases.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so I'm 30 years old and like I can barely, go to a party without blushing red, and it's really awful and it's super stressful. And it's super logical that I would be this way. Because I was super embarrassed in college. And then for 8 years after college, I avoided social interaction and I got worse at it. And so here I am. I'm worse at it. And so then if you think this way, also, you aren't next going to say, oh, well, I should now be doing pickup dating. And I should be walking around and talking to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
And I should be in, 5 social clubs. No. You go can you go can you smile at the pretty girl at Target? For the love of God, no, don't talk. Just, can you smile? Can you go to an event where there is structured social interaction so that even if you are wildly embarrassed and uncomfortable the whole time, there's somebody just walking you through it?
Yeah.
And if you know that that is where you are, you know that it's logical that you are where you are, and you see a logical pathway to get yourself out of it, there's suddenly way less reason to be ashamed. And then also, if you're in this self-coaching mindset, then when the shame does happen, you can hear it as a voice in your head, as opposed to your reality.
Everything makes sense with enough information.
Yes.
And I think that for other people as well, right? If we see someone do something and we're judging them, it's a reflection of ourselves. Of course, it's a projection as well. And I think it's us not realizing that, hey, if I knew everything that person had been through, everything that they're going through right now, it probably makes sense that they responded the way that they do. And of course, all of us are different humans and we may respond in different ways, but I think compassion can sometimes be easy for other people, but it's very difficult for ourselves. And for you as well, you said you went to college when you were 15 and you graduated and it was the worst day of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment moving forward, I mean, I could imagine how difficult that was to have compassion for yourself when you felt like you did what you were told, but you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And one of the things that you're best at in this world is helping people figure out what they want to do next. And I think for many people in their life, they have no idea what they want to do with their lives, and they're beating themselves up day after day for not knowing and feeling like they should know, and they just should all over themselves, what keeps them in that cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Graduation day was the saddest day of my life because it was the day that I realized that I just followed the rules. It was the day that I realized that I'd just done what I was told, and it wasn't getting me the results that I wanted. And it just led me to, I mean, it took many years, but slowly develop a passion for learning to stand up for yourself and figure out for yourself what needs to be the right path forward, as opposed to just blindly following.
When that happened, how did you figure out what that next step was? And how do, and as well, how do you help other people do that? What do you think plays the biggest role in allowing people to figure that out?
Yeah, so if you want the fastest path to figuring out what the next step is in your life, just do this. Sit down in the middle of your room, close your eyes, and ask yourself what you want. And the first thing that is going to happen is your brain is going to run through a bunch of what we call cravings.
Mm.
And so the cravings are things that you want that make life worse. That's how we're going to define cravings. And so you're going to run through your Rolodex of porn, cookies, ice cream, like whatever your thing is. Let yourself disregard those. And then what you're going to be met with next, if you do this as a meditation, is likely terrifying, deafening silence. You're going to run through all the things that you crave, and then you're going to go, okay, I see that you want those things, but that not today, not right now. That's not what this exercise is about. What else do you want? That is a desire, which is what I will call something that you want that makes life better. And so keep listening for it, and probably what you will get is silence. And that's when you're going to go, oh boy. And just wait. Wait and see. And ask yourself again, what do you want? And you might start planning the next 5 years. And then what you need to do is say, no. This is about today. What do you want right now? That could happen right now. And then, somewhere in the back of your mind, a still small voice will say something like, well, a glass of water would be nice. And what you do is you get up and immediately get a glass of water, and then sit back down, close your eyes, and say, okay, you wanted something, and you got it. You can get what you want. Now, what else would you like? And what that is what I call a rep. Right? We all need reps in learning. This is a rep on desire. The reality is desire, the desire muscle, the capacity to want, is a thing that can be trained. A lot of religions, a lot of traditional philosophies treat what humans want as like automatically evil, automatically bad, like, oh, you want bad things. The reality is like you can want all sorts of things. You can want the good things, you can want bad things, and it's trainable. And if you go through this exercise, you're going to hear that little whisper in your voice that you haven't been listening to. And if you keep working on this, and I have people do this over and over again, this exercise, and this was one of the exercises that saved my life, is if you give yourself reps on listening for a desire and acting on it, and then getting your desire met, and then getting a positive result, it will amplify your capacity to have desires. And if you do that, you will start to know what you want.
You brought up the still small voice was something that I was introduced to about a year ago from a meditation teacher I had on the podcast. And it's kind of like intuition in a way. And when you don't listen to your intuition, it gets smaller and smaller, and you can hear it less and less because you're not acting on it when you hear it. And I think that's what the big thing is for people, is that they don't know what they want in their life because they're not listening to what that still small voice is telling them. And so when they don't listen to it, it gets quieter and quieter, and they get out of touch more and more with their intuition, with that trust in themselves to act on that intuition. And one of the things that I think is really fascinating is we're all told that we're supposed to know what we want. Like, one of the worst questions I was asked growing up was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, that's probably one of the worst questions you can possibly ask someone, because not only you're putting someone in a box of like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and then you go to college or you get into a trade or whatever it may be, and you dedicate your life to that one thing. That is who you are now. But not only that, is you're boxing yourself off to such a small life because that's the only thing that you can see. And you feel you have to know. And if you don't know, then you're behind, and then you're not figuring it out. And it's such a difficult thing because we supposed to ourselves all of the time. And if we don't know what we're supposed to do or what we think we want to do, we just beat ourselves up more and more. And I don't think you're supposed to know what you want to do in this life. Like, when people ask me, where are you going to be in 5 years? I couldn't tell you where I'm going to be literally physically in a month from now. I don't know what state I'm going to be in. I don't know what country I'm going to be in. I might be going to Peru. I might be back in Austin. But so for us to think that, us to be delusional enough to think that we're supposed to know what we're supposed to do with the rest of our lives, it's silly.
Look, a lot of people have a 10-year plan and they don't know what flavor of ice cream they like. And it's unreasonable to think that you could have a high-level desire like a 10-year plan and it be coherent if you don't have the capacity to determine what flavor of ice cream you like.
Mm.
And what I mean by this is, again, desire is a skill set. It requires practice.
Mm.
And we know, like, one of the great tragedies of life is people that come up with these 10, 20, 30-year plans, and they work towards them for 30 years, and then they get there and they're miserable. Then the other side is the ones that never make a plan, right? That's the other half of the misery. But the way we connect the dots between those two places is we give ourselves ever-increasing reps.
Mm.
It's just like progressive overload on weightlifting. Like, it's so straightforward when we like break it down, which is, can you figure out how to know when you want a bottle of water? And then, can you figure out how to know how to have a nice evening that you would like to have? And then, can you figure out how to have a good day? And then maybe a week. And then, what would you like to accomplish this month? And then maybe a 3-month project. And so this is actually what I did in my own life, was when I had that point, when I lost my friend, and I realized, like, oh, like, you're incompetent. Like, you're just not able to do the things that you want to do. What I did was I just let go of the big dream. And so I jokingly tell my clients all the time, like, give up on your dreams. That's how you get there. And so what I did was I let go of the rock star. I let go of the big image that I had of what I wanted to accomplish. And I went, wow, like, you can't do any of that. What would make your life better tomorrow? And so I started taking a trash bag a week out of my house, which was definitely the right thing to do because that friend that I lost was my roommate. And so the next thing I did was learn minimalism. I kept taking trash bags out until I got to 7 shirts, and I was like, okay, maybe I should keep the 7.
Yeah.
I think a week's worth of shirts is reasonable. But I then that was the first thing that I could do, was I was like, I can get rid of stuff that's making my life worse. Let me try that. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, life got a little bit better. I started to just feel like I was breathing easier. Like, life just felt a little bit better. And then I was like, okay, I can put an extra $5 on my credit card. I can do that. And it was the first time in my life that putting an extra $5 on my credit card felt like an accomplishment and not an act of shame. Mm. This is super important. It's because the people with really big dreams, when they want to accomplish something really big, small steps feel embarrassing. They feel like, oh, I should be doing more. And then you don't take the small steps. And anything that incentivizes you not to take the steps you need to take in life is really dangerous. And so when I let go of the big dreams and I went, oh, like, it'd actually be a big accomplishment for me to put $5 on my credit card at this point because it's maxed out and I'm living in poverty and I'm paycheck to paycheck. Like, okay, I'm going to work an extra hour. I'm going to find a way to work an extra hour and $5 of that's going on my credit card. And for once, I took a small step and I felt proud. And that was amazing to actually feel proud of something that was within my control. And from there, I kept going. And I'm proud to say, before ever learning how to increase my income, I managed to learn how to pay off debt and manage my finances to the point that I became completely debt-free while still living on the poverty line. That's a big accomplishment. Like I got rid of all my credit card debt and all of my student debt, which was like I went to a private college. and I did that while living on the poverty line because I realized I still wasn't big enough. I still wasn't strong enough to figure out the income part. But I was like, I can pay off debt. This is something I can do. And so I just kept chugging. And I slowly corrected my diet. I slowly learned different things. And I slowly grew. Every step was tiny. But for once, I was proud of the tiny steps because I was seeing things in perspective of who I was. And I realized it was reasonable for this tiny step to be a big accomplishment. And I remember getting to the point one day where I was debt-free. I started retirement investing. I was no longer afraid that, when I was 65, I was going to be eating dog food because I didn't have any money. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Dave Ramsey. I knew that I was growing towards something. I saw hope in my life. And I remember distinctly taking a walk and going, like, this wasn't the life that I planned for. This wasn't the life that I even wanted. But this is a life that I'm proud of. And I don't need to be famous. And I went viral that month because that's how the universe works. Mm-hmm. I started taking reasonable steps and I started getting reasonable results. And I don't mean reasonable in the sense of like, oh, be reasonable, be less. I just mean realistic.
Yeah.
And it just works. It just works to do what you can do today that will make tomorrow to better. And if you do this, then you become more capable of doing something bigger tomorrow. And so what a lot of people miss about accomplishment is they see that thing that they want to do far away that they'd like to accomplish, and they ask, what do I need to do in order to get there? And then they think they can do that thing and get there. But they don't look at themselves and realize, like, you're still an infant. And so anything that you would do today is unlikely to get the result that you want to get because you're just not that big yet.
Yeah.
And so what if you turned yourself into the type of person who could get that accomplishment? What if you turned yourself into the type of person who could accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish? What if you focused on that? And there's another rabbit hole where you can get lost in that, but it's fine. But like, you have to learn how to do what is reasonable for you today so that you can have more power for tomorrow.
Yeah. As highly ambitious people, you neglect the small steps and you over glamorize the huge, ginormous steps. And so then we never take the step.
And what that resulted in is today I'm on a path that I know it's my path. Mm-hmm. Because every step of the way I've gone, well, do I want this? And will this make things better? And can I do this? And is it realistic? And I took a step, and then my life got better. Mm-hmm. And I checked in, and I went, was it good? And then I reoriented myself, because sometimes it was bad, mm-hmm. and I went closer towards the thing that I want. And so you asked earlier, like, how does a person know what they want? is they practice knowing what they want. And so now I know what I want on a really deep level. I know the lifestyle that I want to live. I know the business ambitions that I have. I know the social ambitions that I have. I know what I know the things that I want to accomplish. I know the things that I desire. And I'm not afraid that when I get there, I'm going to regret it. I'm not afraid that it's not real, because I've given myself reps on going after things that I desire to the point that I know when it feels true, because I have the skill set.
Yeah, this leads me into something I was curious about, and I've been asking coaches that come on the podcast. As a coach, I find that a lot of the people that come to work with me, they're coming for something, yet they need something completely different. And you're working with the top 0.1% in the world of people, of income earners, whatever it may be. What are they coming for, and what do you think that they realize they actually need?
It's a good question, and sometimes it does, go in wild directions. Like, one of my favorite examples was the guy that was like, he came to me and he goes, I want to exit my company. He's like, I've been in this company for a while. I've built it really big. I want you to coach me on exiting it. I've got to get out. I'm feeling trapped. He started to use some language that I was like, this is interesting. So I, just did this kind of standard, casual, asking about various things in his life, of how they were going. And then I dropped a little quick, how's your marriage?
Right.
And he was like, it's okay. And I was like, are you getting laid? He's like, no.
Right.
And he was feeling trapped in his marriage.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, if you were getting laid in your marriage, would you feel a little bit differently about your company? He went, oh, possibly. And I said, would you like to try fixing that first? And he said, that's fixable? I said, that's absolutely fixable. Mm-hmm. Would you like to give it a try? And he was like, hell yes. And long story short on that, we turned that around to a very positive thing. And his wife sings his praises all the time. And they're very happy. They're super happy marriage now, really solid. And through this, we got to every single time I talked about something in his relationship, I would say, okay, now what does that say about how you relate to your employees? Mm. Because how you interact on one-on-one is how you interact on group. It all extrapolates out. And he'd always go, oh my God, I've got to change some things in how this organization is structured, and how I provide feedback, and how I communicate with my employees, all these things. And then we got to the end of this particular phase. I actually still work with him. We got to the end of this particular phase of working together, and I said, okay, so what's your mission in life? Because we'd gotten to a point where that was needed for our talks. And he told me, and I said, what's your business's mission? And it was the exact same thing. And he said, Josh, I got to get off the call. I got a lot of work to do. I said, I'll see you later. And sure enough, he called me up later. He said, okay, now I'm ready to exit the company for real, because I know I want to. So now he has a good marriage, and he's building the company bigger to a good level, and he's doing it the way he wants to exit in a way that creates an incredible life for himself. And so, yeah, sometimes the stories are quite wild, where it's like, somebody comes in for one thing and it's totally different. The most common is someone comes in stating one problem and it's the exact opposite thing, right? And that's because we often need balancing in order to get what we want, right? And so I get a lot of dudes that are really aggressive scaling their companies, and they are, they just want to scale harder and scale more. And to do that, they're like, how do I be more focused, more disciplined, more structured, push harder in this one specific direction? And really, they just kind of need to chill the fuck out for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they have a much deeper insight on how to approach things, and they scale much farther and faster than if they would have just kept bashing their head against a brick wall. And I'm not saying that my advice is always to tell people to chill out. That is, there's a lot of different things that we work on. But oftentimes what we're doing is we're isolating the bottleneck, and then we're viewing it from a perspective of essentially order and chaos and learning theory, which is, where is the thing out of balance? Like, why is this not working from a perspective of balance? And then what are the logical steps that would put it into balance? And that does result oftentimes, and a lot of people come into me and, we think one thing is the problem and it's something totally different, but we balance ourselves out and then we're able to move forward.
Yeah. That same kind of person probably took him a long time to get to the point where I'm like, I kind of need help. Like, I can't do this alone. Because so many of us had such a big issue with pride or ego, where we feel we need to do it by ourselves, until we have someone that's surrounded by us, and we take what could have took 6 years and it takes 6 months because we have someone outside of us to help us see our blind spots. And it's one of the difficult, I really think that, like, coaching is one of the only cheat codes in life, because you can't see the picture while you're in the frame, right? You can't see your problems if you're so close to them. And having someone just be there to kind of like, hey, turn your head a little bit right here, like, here's like the way forward, is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And I think so many people are resistant to it.
Yeah, it's very true. And a really straightforward example just popped into my mind that I know sometimes I can get very theoretical with these things. A very concrete example. Tony Robbins tells a story about optimizing the accuracy of some of the military and their ability, their marksmanship.
Yeah.
And the problem was, I can't hit the target from a long distance away. Right? So that's the thing they're coming in for. Right? And then he solved it by taking the soldier and walking him straight in front of the target, 1 foot away, and saying, raise your pistol and fire at it. The soldier's like, what? Right? Because this is like I said, we were talking about polarities. This is the opposite of what was wanted.
Yep.
Right? I want to be able to hit the target from really far away. He walked him 1 foot away from the target and he said, hit the target. And the soldier's like, all right, hit the target. And his bullseye. Of course. And then he stepped him 1 foot farther away and he said, hit the target. And he kept doing this until the guy was far away. Why did this work? Well, it's a combination of things. It's reps, but also one of the things, he was practicing excellence as opposed to practicing adjustment, right? Because if you walk only 1 foot away from a target, you're going to hit it perfectly. And actually being perfect is a skill set. Like, excellence is a skill set in and of itself. A lot of times people think you need to adjust yourself to excellence. Sometimes you actually have to practice being excellent. That's a skill set that needs reps too. And so being 1 foot away from the target, he was able to practice excellence. And that was what got him the solution of being able to hit the target from very far away. And so that's a really great example of, like, doing the exact opposite thing to get the result that you want. And yeah, a lot of times it's very difficult to see this from within ourselves, because we just see our goal and what we are currently trying to do to achieve the goal, and then we filter everything through that and we go, okay, well, like, what's the minimum step to adjust myself to get that goal accomplished, when sometimes you just need something totally out of left field, and that's what's going to get you there faster.
Yeah. I think too, it's like I can't do this thing, the belief is the issue as well. Like, if you believe that, you're gonna self-sabotage yourself into doing that. It's one thing that I find so fascinating about our psychology, is that if you tell yourself you cannot do something, you are going to self-sabotage yourself into proving yourself right, even if that's not the outcome that you want.
Correct. It happens all the time. And a lot of the work sometimes is just suspending disbelief.
Do you find a lot of the clients you work with hit their upper limit?
What do you mean?
Have you ever heard of Gay Hendricks by chance?
I can't recall.
He's the author of The Big Leap and a couple others. But I think we have a self-image issue in the world, in the sense that if you perceive yourself to be some kind of person and then you get yourself, example, when you were at the poverty line and you were making that amount of money and then you made a big amount of money because you changed your career, you got into coaching and all the other things that you did, there's probably a moment in time where you were like, I probably don't deserve this, and so I self-sabotage, and you push yourself back down into making less money or doing less things. And I find a lot of people that achieve success too quick and or just achieve success in general and they're not used to it, they self-sabotage to push themselves back to what they think they deserve.
Yeah, so what we just talked about here is actually the antidote to that.
Yeah.
What we've been talking about is the antidote to maxing out your upper limit and coming back down. The reason why is because if you give yourself this type of reps, these this repetitious act of little by little, better and better, what happens is it cements your reality. And this thing that you're describing is very real. We know that if you are struggling to say if you are overweight and you want to lose weight, and the amount that you are overweight is way beyond your story of what is okay, you're like, oh man, like this is not good. It's pretty easy for you to lose weight, relatively speaking. But if you then get to a point where you've lost weight and you're kind of within your story of, what your reality is, of like, yeah, this is, I'm a middle-class dude. I'm white collar. I work these hours. Most of my friends look kind of like me. It suddenly becomes really hard to go past that point to lose more weight.
Yeah.
Because when you are way below your story, there's actually tension pulling you upwards. But when you're trying to go past your story, there becomes tension pulling you downwards. So the only way to get through this is to change your story. And the way you change your story is through repeated experiences that reinforce the new story, right? Thought follows action. Theory follows practice. And so if you repeatedly do things that create a new experience for yourself, then you can believe that it's real. You can believe that you deserve it. You can believe that it's reasonable. And so if you give yourself this graduated experience in life, if you are stepping yourself through the process of growth, if you are coaching yourself step by step so that you don't miss any steps, this isn't to say you can't have leaps of development. That's real. But if you are making the foundation of your growth solid by always practicing these fundamentals of bit by bit, day by day, make tomorrow better than yesterday, then when you get to a good place, even if you do make a jump, you're going to be able to look at your life and go, oh, I deserve that. It's reasonable. And I'm super grateful, but also it's reasonable that I'm here.
Yeah, the belief drives behavior and behavior also drives belief, but you need evidence to reinforce why you see yourself as some kind of person. It goes into the last question I ask every guest. My question to you really encapsulates what I want to do with this podcast, and I think a lot of us are trying to learn new things. I went through that phase of my life of just taking on more information. We talked about it before this podcast. And I think a lot of the work we have to do is unlearn things. And so my question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
So often beliefs are damaging by the matter of degree that you believe them. And by that, I mean there are grains of truth often in many beliefs, but if you make them fixed, then they become problematic. And so the one that I'd say I'm working on right now is a pretty simple one, is that rejection is harmful.
Mm.
As you know, I some of the stories that I told about, you know, social shyness, I got some of those things in my life, and that created some difficulty in my life. And so there's more I can do personally to work through my fears of rejection. And the reality is rejection is dangerous. But how dangerous, right? And so I am working through the story or the belief that rejection is going to kill me, right? And I am going through exactly this process that we've talked about here in the frame of just sorting myself through rejection. And so what does that look like? I'm not just giving myself a whole bunch of crazy rejection therapy. You know, I'm not doing the whole like go to the coffee shops and ask for a discount so that the barista looks at you weird. Which, I mean, it's fine. Like that's a mechanism that works if it works for you. But again, I have a tendency to go all out, and the reality is I probably wouldn't get the results that I need from doing that type of behavior. And so what I'm doing is I'm practicing making small asks. I'm practicing little by little getting extreme confidence in the capacity to ask, the capacity to invite, the capacity to suggest. And I'm learning to get nuanced with it and tapped in to the point that I feel really, really comfortable asking somebody for something. I feel really, really comfortable meeting somebody that, you know, might not like me, or, you know, offering a business deal to somebody that seems above my pay grade, you know, like whatever it might be. Or just simple social interactions where, you know, rejection could occur just at a social event. I'm playing with it so that I can become more comfortable knowing where I sit with rejection, knowing what actually is healthy. Because again, going back to that polarity thing, I don't want to switch to just going, oh, people can reject me anytime. I'm just going to turn into the asshole that's constantly asking for everything all the time and just, you know, just run the numbers until somebody says yes, right? That's the classic rejection therapy. That's not what I want. I want to really know what's aligned. And for me, it's just working through the story of that, you know, right now I still feel that rejection is worse than it is. It still makes me feel sad. It still makes me feel bad and feel like I did something wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning to just be more okay with that.
I love it. It's such an amazing thing to hear that I think a lot of us feel like other people have life figured out because we look from an external perspective. And so much of this podcast, what I want to do is help people realize, hey, no one really has it figured out. We're all still unlearning, and other people just fake it a little bit better than you do.
Yeah, there was a awesome short clip I saw of a professor getting up on the front of his class. He said, okay, so this is week 1 of theoretical physics, and there's some good news and some bad news about theoretical physics, which is one is that you do not understand, you don't know anything about theoretical physics. But then 2, the good news is that I also do not understand theoretical physics.
Okay.
And so within a couple of weeks, you also will not understand theoretical physics. And you will be able to go out and help others also not understand theoretical physics with you.
Yeah.
Meaning we're all figuring it out together.
100%. You've got some exciting things coming up. Tell people where they need to go. Tell people what's coming up for you.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at Josh Terry Plays, or go to my website at joshterryplays.com. You can work with me. You can learn from me there, and then I'll be publishing a book, Pull Back to Push Harder, pretty soon.
I'm excited for it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.